You're listening to a Roddenberry podcast.
Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast, episode 573, Fury.
Welcome into another episode of Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. I'm John Champion.
And I'm Charlie Carden, sitting in for Norman Lau. Each week on Mission Log, we examine an episode of Star Trek, picking apart its morals, meanings, messages, and asking ourselves if the whole thing stands the test of time.
This week, Fury, the one where we get a surprise visit from Kes. And no one is more surprised than Kes herself, who spends most of the show asleep in a plant drawer. Can Kes save Kes, or at least wake her up in time to talk some sense into Kes? Well, we'll find out. But first, let's meet our guest host, Charlie Carden, from the Secret Friends Unite podcast. Charlie, welcome to Mission Log.
Thank you very much. It is so very exciting to be here. I love what you guys do, and I love that I get to be a part of it, so thank you very much.
Thank you, man. And we saved it for the Patreon, but the long and short of it, you and I met on the Star Trek cruise a few years ago as fellow podcasters, and I would love it if you told people where to find you and what you do.
Absolutely. We're available over at secretfriendsunite.com. You can find all of our podcasts there. We have 4 shows, one about general pop culture, one about Star Trek, obviously, that's run by me, a Star Wars podcast, and a podcast about video games, and a great Patreon with a lot of bonus content. secretfriendsunite.com. Come find us out there and on all the socials.
Excellent. And you've got some Star Trek bona fides because you have also been breaking down Trek in podcast form and just happen to be coinciding with Mission Log in Season 6 of Voyager.
Yeah.
So it's kismet.
It is.
It's great.
It is. I'll be very prepared because we do it just in smaller chunks. So we'll take 6 episodes and talk about them in 30 minutes. So I'll be very detailed to talk about this one, just every nook and cranny. So I'm very excited.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Well, let me ask you in the meantime to tell folks where they can find us.
Awesome. Well, again, here at Mission Log, we'd love to hear from you. Mission Log is a conversation about Star Trek. Find us on Facebook at Mission Log Pod and Threads at Roddenberry Podcast. The conversation always continues in the Mission Log Discord with near daily live events and 24/7 chat about the topics you love. Get an invitation to our private server by joining patreon.com/missionlog. While you're at it, one of the most important ways to help the podcast you love is to leave a 5-star rating and review at Apple or any of your favorite podcast platforms. Always remember that your comments could be used in the show, and that's a good thing. I hope.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. All right.
All right. And here's John Champion with this week's trivia.
Okay, let's approach this with some fury, shall we? Now, today's episode, the story is credited to Rick Berman and Brannon Braga. And as always, when you see a story by and a teleplay by credit, they don't always mean the same thing, so you have to dig a little bit deeper. So Rick has his name on this story because he is the one who went to the staff and said, you know what, we should bring back Kes. And that was it. That was really the pitch.
A lot of guidance.
And yeah, right. And then he went to Jennifer Lean and said, hey, we want to bring back Kes. It's going to be a great story. And okay, so the rest of the team better come up with a great story because she had already said yes. Mm-hmm. So that left it to Brannon Braga to really shape what the story would be. The actual teleplay credit went over to, longtime Voyager writer-contributors Brian Fuller and Michael Taylor. Brian really fleshed out the story, but he says that he credits Brannon with actually giving it shape, with actually giving him a direction to go. So there's a lot of Brannon's hands on what we have here. Now, it was directed by John Bruno, and forgive you if you don't remember that name specifically, because John actually, the only other episode of Voyager that he directed was Tinker, Tenor, Doctor, Spy. So if you go back to that episode, you can hear a little more about his credits, and he actually co-wrote an episode called Lifeline, which we will get to, with none other than Bob Picardo. So that is the only remaining John Bruno credit that we have on Voyager. let's meet our guest stars. Well, it definitely is family reunion week on Voyager. We get to welcome back a whole host of guest stars and maybe some forgotten characters. There's Scarlett Palmer's again as Naomi Wildman, and a much bigger surprise is seeing Naomi's mom, Samantha Wildman, played again here by Nancy Hauer. Hey, remember Lieutenant Carey from Engineering? Well, he is back too, played again by Josh Clark.
Poor Lieutenant Carey.
I know. Come on. You have this like whole back catalog of characters you could bring back. Come on. Let's get him in there. He's not part of Voyager's crew, but Vaughn Armstrong making an appearance here as a Vidian. Now, Vaughn, of course, has played a multitude of Trek characters over the years since TNG, but this is his first and only outing in the Vidian makeup, and we will see him a few more times on Voyager as yet different characters before he makes a big jump over to Enterprise. And finally, the special guest star who is front and center, Jennifer Lean, returns to Voyager to reprise her role as Kes in not one, but 2 time periods.
Welcome to the Delta Quadrant. Guess who's back? Go on, guess. It's not Seska. Well, not yet.
Prologue. Tuvok has got a secret. And in Janeway's ready room, the captain is sternly pressuring him to give it up. She searched through all the records, and she knows what's up. It's his birthday. Yep, Tuvok is getting nearer to the big 3 digits, and while he's been trying to keep it a secret, Janeway has gone the length of replicating a cake, complete with a candle. Their moment is cut short when Chakotay calls the captain to the bridge. Voyager has received a distress call from a small vessel. Sensors detect an Ocampan life form on board, and to their shock, it's Kes, looking much older and weaker than when we last saw her, and asking to come aboard. When Janeway asks why, Kes cuts the signal, then she sets her ship on a collision course. Just before the impact, she transports herself onto Voyager, instantly leaving a wake of destruction where she walks. Act 1. Kes storms through Voyager, radiating powerful neurogenic energy that destroys everything in her path. Ignoring hails and bypassing force fields, she reaches Engineering when security officers fail to stop her. With a deadly energy pulse, she kills B'Elanna while gripping the warp core, then vanishes in a flash of light. And we cut to the same location 5 years in the past. It's 2371, just weeks after Voyager was stranded in the Delta Quadrant. Now in the past, the older Kes takes on the appearance of her younger self. When B'Elanna offers to let her observe a warp core diagnostic, she declines, claiming she's needed in sickbay. There, she entertains the doctor's musings about a name while hiding and stealing a hyperspray behind her back. She then heads to the aeroponics bay, where she ambushes her younger self, sedates her, and eventually stashes her in a drawer just to make sure there won't be 2 Keses walking around the ship. Act 2. In the mess hall, Tom and Neelix contemplate names for a new specialty cheeseburger when Kes arrives, seeming a bit distant and humorless. She grabs coffee for Janeway and heads to the ready room where the captain and Chakotay are discussing the Vidians and, well, you remember what those guys do. Chakotay goes back to the bridge, and just as he leaves, Kes accidentally spills coffee on Janeway's desk. When Janeway steps out, Kes quickly accesses her computer. Janeway and Tuvok consult with Ensign Wildman about a possible defense against the Vidians, but when Kes crosses to the turbolift, Tuvok catches her eye, sensing something is not quite right. Later, during a briefing about avoiding Vidian patrols through a dangerous region of subspace vacuoles, Tuvok suggests using the Delta Flyer, only to be met with blank stares. The what? Realizing his mistake, he awkwardly apologizes, though the moment lingers. Later still, Tom catches Kes in a shuttle, plotting a course to Ocampa. She brushes it off as studying helm controls and asks for piloting lessons. Tom, unaware of her true motives, agrees. On his own, Tuvok begins seeing some really weird stuff, including Naomi Wildman and a cargo bay complete with 7 of 9, some Borg kids, and regeneration chambers. Snapping back to reality, Tuvok sees Lieutenant Carey, watching him with concern. Kes returns to her quarters, finding a heartfelt message from Neelix and a meal he prepared. Instead of being touched, she has an outburst, smashing everything in sight. Composing herself, she opens a secure channel to contact the Vidians, offering Voyager's shield, weapons, and tactical data in exchange for safe passage home. When asked why she's betraying her crew, she coldly replies, "They abandoned me long ago." Act 3. Kes checks on the other Kes, the one who is unconscious in an aeroponics bay drawer, before using her abilities to bypass computer security and access Voyager's tactical data. Meanwhile, Tuvok confides in Janeway about his disturbing visions, seeing a half-Katarian child and Borg crew members. Unlike his usual meditative hallucinations, these feel like premonitions. Janeway orders continuous scans to track any anomalies the next time he experiences one. From the bridge, Chakotay announces that Voyager has reached the subspace vacuoles, requiring 216 precise course corrections over the next 3 hours. After the first maneuver, Janeway heads to sickbay to check on Ensign Wildman, while Tuvok suffers another vision, this time of an approaching vessel no one else sees. Of course, Vulcans don't get embarrassed, but Tuvok is unsettled enough that he requests to be relieved of duty. In sickbay, the doctor reluctantly confirms Wildman's pregnancy. She's expecting a half-Katarian daughter. Janeway realizes Tuvok's hallucinations are a glimpse into the future. But before they can investigate further, Tuvok collapses in engineering from synaptic shock after a vision of older Kes zapping B'Elanna with energy. The EMH does what he can in sickbay to stabilize him, and a proximity scan by Janeway reveals the spike in tachyon particles that she has suspected, evidence of temporal interference. But before much else can be done, Voyager suddenly comes under attack by the Vidians. Act 4. The Vidians match Voyager's shield frequencies and latch onto the hull, preparing to board. Janeway orders the Doctor's neural agent deployed in the breach sections, but they've been locked out of environmental controls. Someone has sabotaged the ship. As the Vidians close in, Janeway realizes they had inside knowledge of Voyager's defenses. Scans detect a transmission from the aeroponics bay along with 2 Kesses. Janeway rushes there to find the older Kes trying to beam her younger, sedated self away. Confronted, Kes lashes out, throwing Janeway across the room with her powers. She reveals that in her original timeline, Janeway encouraged her to develop her abilities too soon, leading to terrifying results. She left Voyager seeking answers, but felt lost and rejected everywhere she turned. Now she's determined to rewrite history by sending her younger self back to Ocampa to live a different life. Janeway pleads with Kes to stop, but she grows more volatile. Left with no choice, Janeway raises her phaser, setting to kill. Meanwhile, Chakotay leads his own risky maneuver, literally ripping Voyager free from the Vidian attacker and firing away to force a retreat. He calls to Janeway in aeroponics, who is faced with 2 Kesses, both unconscious on the floor, and one transformed into her older, frail self. Act 5. With Voyager out of immediate danger, Tuvok returns to engineering where he last saw Kes in his premonition, confirming that tachyons are concentrated in the warp core, likely how she traveled through time. And since that takes place in the future sometime, Janeway tells Tuvok they'll need to be ready for it. Young Kes awakens in sickbay, and Janeway and Tuvok are there with her, deactivating the EMH just to be safe. Because now it's time to break the temporal prime directive all over the place and tell this Kes about what will become of her sometime in the future. Cut to 5 years later. Janeway mock grills Tuvok about his birthday, and then Voyager receives a distress call from a lone Ocampan. Janeway instantly recognizes the moment and orders Red Alert, raising shields and evacuating Deck 11. Just as before, the older Kes transports herself onto the ship and storms toward engineering. But this time, Janeway is ready. A holo recording from young Kes is triggered, reminding her future self that no one forced her down this path. Every choice was her own. Janeway urges her to let go of her anger, to stop rewriting the past, and to let them help her. Kes, finally remembering who she used to be, softens and realizes the young Kes can't go home, but she can. In the transporter room, Neelix offers a gift of Leola root for the journey. She smiles, asking if he sees anybody he knows. "Only you," he replies warmly. With that, Kes beams back to her ship, setting course for Okapa. As Tuvok asks what they should tell the crew, Janeway simply says, "A friend got lost, and we helped her find her way." The end.
Excellent, John. Thank you so much for that recap. Lots to unpack. So let's get it going.
Let's do it. Thank you for bearing with me, you and everybody else. But yeah, some interesting plot points there. Why don't we start at the beginning? I love that Tuvok and Janeway have this long friendship. 20 years. And that's a great little setup and punchline. Also, space cake. I just got to point it out. It's not a normal birthday cake. It is a space cake. I wish that throughout Voyager, we had gotten a lot more of the Janeway-Tuvok relationship. Because when you get a moment like this is great. It reminds you they've known each other for so long.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I do love the cake itself. I swear that is a replicator programmed cake that we've totally seen on TNG. You know what I mean?
I think so too.
I understand reused props, but when you're reusing like baked goods, I just that takes some talent. That's definitely it. Kind of, you know, it's a little world building. You know what I mean? It gives you a little taste of the replicator. So kind of neat.
You just mentioned something important, and I swear we won't belabor the point here, but this comes back every now and then on Mission Log, and it bothers me. Okay, so a replicator, is it replicating a finished food item? Or does the replicator know the recipe and it is creating that thing in a replicated state? Because if we're seeing the same cake that we saw in TNG, that means somebody made a cake one day, put it into a pattern analyzer.
Yeah.
And then now anytime you ask for a space birthday cake, you get that.
Space birthday cake 47. Ha-ha!
Yeah. Oh, there we go.
But like you see, like Riker loves to cook, but he doesn't replicate like the eggs and stuff. Like he has those or something. It's just, especially on Voyager, where you know they're so recalcitrant to use the replicator because of power related issues. So, but Janeway did, and then she does this coy little thing where she's like pushing a button so she doesn't ask it for the cake, but she's got to push cake number 47, and then it replicates. So but it's just it's for the gag, and it works.
It is. Yeah. I love it. Their whole interaction is great. Tuvok's discomfort and blowing out the candle because he has to, because this is a friend and his captain. It's cute. It's a good moment.
Absolutely.
All right, let me ask you about Kes. I have to say that just seeing the preview image for the episode kind of spoiled me again. Like, I knew that she came back, but I didn't remember it was here. So I got a little bit spoiled for it, but then she's got quite the entrance.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And it's a switch, just like when she comes in. She looks like she's in a real haze, and everybody knows that poor Jennifer Lean in real life, she went through some very tough times, and she continues to, at least at last report, I believe. At last report, she lives back east and has gotten into some trouble with the law, which is terrible. But she's had a lot of different issues, and so seeing her that way, I'm like, gosh, it's a little bit too much art imitates life. But when she beams onto the ship and she's doing this, kind of stumble down deck 11 and everything's blowing out, she's a hazard to that ship, because when she was leaving, when she was leaving back in The Gift in season 4 episode 2, it was practical effects, like there'd be like a onset explosion of like a panel flying out. Where with this, it was very CGI and everything was kind of thrown out behind her. So I'm like, they should have made her stick around with a shovel just to do some it's like like somebody who's forgot their wallet at a restaurant. No, you got to wash dishes. That's the old adage, right?
Yeah,
they should have made her do some cleanup, because I think it was just everything that she did in this episode was just too much. It was like her with the nice, like, Neelix made you dinner and a recording, and she just goes blah,
smashed it.
And it's just like, just take it easy. she's too mad.
I like to think that maybe, just maybe, because remember, in The Gift, Kes used her special powers to fast forward Voyager, something like 10,000 light years,
exactly,
or something like that.
Just, woo!
So maybe if she's got enough of that power left, maybe she pushed them ahead a bit, pushed herself back a little bit, because it's a long way to a Kampa at this point, and maybe did a little bit of cleanup. Maybe just like we're going to get the scorch marks off the corridor.
It just very much seems like if a few years ago she could push them through Borg space like she did, that she could come back and she'd be like, well, I know I was a real jerk. I tore the ship up. Here it's fixed. And now you're back in the Alpha Quadrant. Boom. Yes. Thanks. Peace out.
Why not?
So it's she's less powerful. So there's a lot of stuff that is just kind of cattywampus about everything going on with her power set in this episode. It's just kind of like, huh? Which, as you were talking about, the written by and the teleplay. So you've got all the heavy hitters of this show writing this episode. And to me, I know anytime we're talking about stuff over on Code 47, my show, and I and Peter, my co-host, and I are going through and saying, oh, this one was written by Ira and Robert Hewitt Wolf. It's got to be a great episode of DS9, right? But you still end up with, it's like, what were you guys doing? 26 episodes a season. There's going to be some that are just going to have to be a dartboard. Like, who's this week's episode going to be about? Kes, and it turns into Mad Libs. You know what I mean? Boop. Yeah.
Well, and that's the thing, because those credits never really tell you who had the final say about everything or who had the biggest contribution. They really, it always comes down to what are the WGA rules and how do we not have too many people listed here, because there is a room, they are all contributing. And I swear most of the time, and this happens with pretty much anything, people come back from it and they say, whether it was a week later or 10 years later, oh, I wish we could have done this.
Right.
I wish we could have made this a two-parter. I wish we could have explored a little more of the backstory here. But as we know, art is never finished, it is abandoned.
Right. Yeah.
So
George Lucas and the Star Wars special editions, right?
Yeah, right.
Throw more critters into Jabba's throne room. Go for it.
Yeah. That made those movies so much better. Now, we have a great Star Trek trope here that I really like, but in reverse, because the Doctor, as he's explaining to Kes that he's picking out a name, so a return to a great kind of season 1 joke,
right?
That he's thinking about Pyong Ko, who discovered a genetic treatment for stopping cancer cells. But then he goes on to mention Schweitzer, Jarvik, and Pasteur. Now, typically with the Star Trek thing, you name 2 real-world people, and then you finish off.
And then it's yada yada of Alpha Centauri. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, right. It's Socrates, Nietzsche, and Garlock of Zebulon 4.
I'll take Garlock. That works for me.
Of course. Why wouldn't you? Yeah, but I like that we get a little taste of that here. Let's talk a little bit about effects, because there is a great moment here when we have our first Kes ×2 scene. Kes sneaks up behind Kes in the aeroponics bay with the hypospray. I freeze-framed that so much and did the little step-through, frame by frame, to see how they did it, and wow, was that really well done. If you do the freeze frame, what you will see is old Kes kind of in the background, sneaking up, okay, and she gets the hypospray, she moves it up toward young Kes's neck, and there's just a tiny little bit of overlap where the hypospray head just kind of dips behind her neck a little bit. Boom, cut to the next frame from behind when you see her hit the ground.
Yeah.
It is so slick, so well done, and it sets the tone for this episode really utilizing some great effects.
Yeah. And again, even watching the kind of rough CGI stuff of Kes walking through the corridor and that flying around, like that looks really chintzy. But like you said, the kind of quasi practical bit that they do, it's not the enemy within from TOS where it's like they're or when Kirk and Spock have their climactic fight in Space Seed in engineering, it could have been you and me. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
or me and my mother. You know what I mean? It's just like it didn't look like anybody at all. But you're absolutely right. There are still that's just great filmography. It's great directing when they can really, and editing really, because editing is the key to everything. You know, knowing what to use and how to put it together and all that kind of good stuff. So yeah, that's awesome.
It's super ambitious. I mean, I do find, like you, that the CG quality sort of comes and goes, and you can tell, like, okay, here's a scene that we spent a lot of time on. We really had to polish it, really had to make it look perfect. And then you go to the corridor scene. All right. It looks like an actor imposed on a CG background. It's 2000-ish CG. So, what we get is what we're going to get. But
true.
It is super ambitious to do that. I would have liked to have seen a practical effect version of that. Mm-hmm. You know, I think they could have pulled it off. But that's just me.
You're gonna get what you're gonna get, exactly. And they were pioneering, trying to make that more like, ooh, wow, you know. Looking at it in retrospect, it's like looking at the optics of the original show before, they were updated for the 40th anniversary back in 2006, which is they did a great job. But to look at, here's the Enterprise going around. It's a purple planet. It's a pink planet. It's a magenta blue planet.
Right. Yeah. Now I do love all the bits that we get as we spend most of our time in season 1 Voyager, and you have hairstyles returning, and you got a little bit between Neelix and Tom. I just note to myself, nobody wants a greasy Neelix. I don't care what you think that is. Nobody wants it.
Oh my goodness.
Looked like a good burger.
Yeah. I did notice one thing, like costume anomalies. It was tough. First of all, everybody needed to have a wig if you really wanted to believe it was 5 years ago. Chakotay had a buzz cut. Tom had your more like 1995 hair. And the thing with the pips, it was funny because they had Tuvok's rank wrong, but they also had it correct because he wore lieutenant commander pips for about the first 2/3 of the first season before they said, oh, he's really a lieutenant. And now he's a lieutenant commander from season 4 forward. Yeah. But they managed to do that. Now, Tom, they also got his correct, but it was wrong. Two solid pips where it should have been 1.5. But he was wearing 2 here because in the first dozen or so episodes, it was somebody finally said, oh yeah, we got his rank wrong because he can't be a senior lieutenant because that's Tuvok's job, So I mean, there's no greater offender in all of Star Trek than Strange New Worlds and the rank stripes. Don't even get me started on that one because that's really they really don't get that right.
That is a mess. But I love how they commit to their own mistake.
Yeah, they did. But they didn't, however, with the hairstyle, because the only hairstyle they got right was Janeway because they put it back in the bun, and that's an easy one because that was a wig to start with. That wasn't Kate's hair. That was a wig. Yes. It was always a wig. Yeah.
It looks so great. And I do like that we get a little the story about the Vidians, the old kidney urban legend. I love that there is a 20th century urban legend that makes its way to the 24th century, but now it's on Risa.
Right. You see, things that will survive World War III, as happened in Star Trek, is all these great urban legends and stuff. Yeah, on Risa. Very good. Yeah, that was good. It's good to see. I love the character of Chakotay. It's glad to see him getting some scenery to chew on in this episode. I thought that was
finally
great.
Yeah. And Naomi's mom, Samantha Wildman. I mean, come on. She's there. She exists. You could have her in other episodes of Voyager with Naomi.
She hasn't made an appearance
since we got Naomi.
Yeah. She showed up in one episode where she was, you get to go on an away mission, and then Naomi thinks she's lost, and it was the one with Flotter, the little child's character in the book. And that, you're right. I think that was it. And her presence in this episode is so weird because she's in sickbay helping the doctor out, and I'm like, but the whole thing about sickbay is that there's nobody to help the doctor out, and that's why they give Kes the job. So her job is very nebulous. And then again, poor Joe Carey. You see him throughout season 1, and then you see him here in a flashback. You see him in a flashback with Seven when she's back at Utopia Planitia before the ship launches, and then he shows up at the end of the series to die. That stinks. I mean, what did he ever do? poor Josh Clark. That's
Yeah.
after B'Elanna took his job, and maybe rightfully so, in the second episode. So he's just of all the characters who actually lived for most of the series, he's the one who I think kind of got the short end of the stick more than anybody else.
You got to have a crew. You got to have people around. Like, they don't just disappear.
So it's like, what's he doing? He's assigned to, Deck 11. He's scrubbing plasma conduits for 7 years.
Right.
Who did he cheese off to get that gig?
Well, one word answer to that, B'Elanna.
Yeah, exactly. She's very mercurial. As a rude woman.
But I like these season 1 hints. You have the EMH back on the monitor because, of course, he doesn't have the mobile emitter anymore. I like the bits with Tuvok getting things wrong, like he's a man out of place. By the way, this idea about using the autopilot to navigate around the vacuoles, I was surprised at Tom's surprise that they would do that. Because I would think in the 24th century, autopilot is absolutely a thing that you want to have.
Hundreds of years
to do
old.
exactly that.
Yeah. To do the boring job of flying through infinite space. Nope, got to have my hands on the wheel for 18 years while we're doing this. And plus they're on this ship with these fancy neural gel packs, which is basically, it looks like a pack you put on your ankle if you twisted your ankle. That's what a gel
exactly
pack looks
what it
like.
is. Yeah.
You'd be like, let's let the computer do it, But again, as we're frequently reminded, the more times you let computer do stuff, the closer we get to Skynet. So maybe that's true. Maybe that's his attitude. I get it.
I think they should just rename Tom's role. It's like, okay, you're not so much a pilot, you're the pilot computer programmer.
Right, exactly.
That's what you do.
I take the specs to the engineers because I'm very good with people, like from Office Space, right?
Exactly. See, we see the flash forward, the vision of the Borg twins. Still don't let them talk because we're just not going to let the kids talk.
You don't want to pay that money.
No. They spent a little money though on this. We see Kes holding up that pad where Neelix has left her a message, and there's an animation on that pad.
Oh, my.
We never see that. It's always literally printed paper stuck onto that prop.
And look how angry it made her. It was just...
She'd be like, no, this is awesome.
Yeah, right. Yeah. He's so thoughtful, just so rude. Kes is just... She's all over the place. I hate it. Come on, Kes.
She is. Yeah. It's a little rough to see her in this state. Yeah. Love bringing back the Vidians because I like that they get mentioned. I wish we had seen more of them on our long journey, I guess this is a thing you can do is you can just keep a body unconscious in the aeroponics space.
She stopped by to let me give you some crackers, crumbled up, or here's a Go-Gurt. I mean, what was she doing to keep her alive? Was she just injecting her here's a cheeseburger,
I know. Yeah.
I mean, she wasn't even hooked up to any equipment, so it's not like, you got this thing keeping you alive. So it was
literally in a drawer for how many days?
Yeah, it's there's a great Simpsons line, Ralph Wiggum, I sleep in a drawer. That was Kes.
Yeah, it absolutely was. Oh, the indignities that she suffers.
I know.
As we see the Vidians come back, I love their ship. Love that we get more of this action sequence. I'd forgotten about the grappling hooks.
Yeah. There was that. And I wasn't sure if they looped the clip from the episode Deadlock back in season 2 because I feel like they tried a very similar, or maybe that was big things that shut down. Because remember, that was the episode where Voyager was duplicated, but only one ship could survive. And they had to detonate the one ship and it destroyed the Vidians. And that's how. So I feel like that's how they boarded the ship back then. But I'd have to go back and rewatch the episode. But it seems very similar. But that did seem like a lot of new. That seemed like it might have been a nice mix of practical and CGI, but not so much so that it looked really messy. But the Vidians were great, and the very nature of it works in two ways because you get a terrible villain like the Kazon, thumbs down, that we were glad to get rid of, even though they were so heavily featured in seasons 1 and 2. And then you get a great villain like the Vidians that they're very original, and they're a great Star Trek villain because they dance the line between morality and necessity. The ends justify the means. But the very nature of Voyager traveling away is that eventually there's races you're not going to see anymore. They're not going to be able to keep up, except for the Borg, which, as you've talked about much on this show, it's just let's beat them with the Borg stick. That you beat that horse so much it's glue. You know what I mean? So
right.
But you're right. I would love to see more of the Vidians. It is super cool, and I can't remember if we've already reached the episode Think Tank where George Costanza tells us that
totally.
he has cured them. The Think Tank, his name wasn't George Costanza,
right.
sorry.
Jason Alexander.
He does, but he throws out there, just last week we cured the Vidian phage, and you were like, all right, that's awesome. And probably, remember the Doctor's girlfriend, so she's he should... maybe she'll. I would say she could show up in Starfleet Academy, but she would have been dead for 500 years. But whatever, she's still. Unless they're immortal, who knows? Maybe they don't die.
There is that. There is that. Yeah, but the ship looks really cool. The action scenes look really cool. Again, you kind of go back and forth between a really ambitious CG shot, maybe some stuff that doesn't hold up quite as well. But I tell you what took me out of it is that you go from those and you cut to a scene of the practical pieces on the Voyager set, and here's like a big honking CRT monitor.
Yeah.
And when the camera gets a little too close and you see all the pixelation,
whoops.
It's like, okay. Maybe that dated worse than the CG.
Yeah, right. Very, very true.
Definitely a Star Trek thing, but I think definitely a TV thing is that sort of weird twilight state where you can be completely unconscious, but then you can also walk under your own power as long as somebody has their arm under you.
Right, your feet aren't dragging like you're a corpse.
Yeah,
You start
walking.
You start seeing
you're standing
feet move.
up.
Yeah.
That's how old Cass is trying to get young Cass out of the room.
Come on, we'll get like she's not trying to weaken at Bernie, or is trying to get her to walk out of the room.
Yeah, right. And I gotta say, back to this CG stuff. Watching Voyager's hull rip apart, that's another bit that I had to go in and freeze frame.
Yeah.
Because if you look closely, I mean, you see a section of corridor.
A lot of crazy details,
stuff. I mean, there's really good detail
there's one portion of it that looked like it was the inside of an airlock ring, which I thought was really impressive. Because it ripped out this huge chunk. And it's tough because in Star Trek, they don't have like the MCU time travel timeline. So when you go into the past, then it's a different layer of the multiverse. It's like whatever happens in the past still happens. So whatever they did, then you had these guys who had to be in spacesuits out there, fixing everything. That before they didn't have to do that, which took more resources. So it's kind of like the butterfly effect. You know what I mean? So but whatever Kess did in that whole experience changed nothing at all that happened in the rest of the show, which is good, but it's also very TV and Star Trek and all this stuff happened, but now we're fine. But let me set my timer on my phone for 5 years because we got to remember that. Yeah, it was just I don't know. We can talk about that more as we draw it to a close.
Sure.
But I just thought it was. But again, super cool sequence, great return of a great alien villain that I just absolutely enjoyed. But it was just the whole part of it. Like it happened, but none of it happened. It was like data malfunction. But now data's fine, so everything's
everything's cool.
Yeah,
no punishment, no longer to be discussed at all. But I kind of wondered here. We're talking about breaking the temporal prime directive. We were talking about messing with the timeline. They deactivate the Doctor, but there is no discussion between Tuvok and Janeway about this at all. It's just like, nope, we're going to do this. We're going to tell you about the future. We're going to set this whole thing in motion,
right?
And we will not talk about it again. Okay. All right.
I mean, maybe Tuvok got to play his logic card there. Says, well, this is the most logical way to play it, and blah, 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 blah. Because, Vulcans do get to do that, don't they? They're like, well, we're super logical. However, there's always an actually with the Vulcans when they decide to go in a different direction. And they can say,
self-serving answer.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like, well, logic says that blah, 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 blah. Yeah, exactly. So they can kind of play it any way they want to play it.
They absolutely can. Yeah. And if anybody's going to set a 5-year timer, that'll be Tuvok.
Exactly.
He should have been more on top of it than Janeway was.
Yeah, because they both were like, we totally forgot about this, from a species that forgets, nothing ever.
Nope.
Yeah.
Nope.
But he's like, yeah, exactly. He's like, no, I don't really know what you're talking about. So, but now I remember. Okay, let's snap to.
Now, I love a good bookending scene. We have the scene with the cake and the fake interrogation of Tuvok. And I especially love it when you shoot it twice. Mm-hmm. And you kind of make them match up, but they use different angles here, which is really cool. Say, like, it's the same, but not.
Right, exactly. Yeah, because life is like that. There's, well, of course, not that we live through recurring, like, memento kind of stuff, but...
Well, I don't know. I start to doubt myself.
Yeah, there's there's different angles to every situation, which, because, again, it wasn't exactly the same, because what they experienced the first time around was a time frame that was, dramatically altered by what happened 5 years in the past. So,
Yeah. Really well done shot. And then I had this feeling like we're going to get back out to the bridge. Oh, no. We know what's about to happen. Look, there's an Ocamp and shoot it.
Yeah, exactly.
I was expecting that.
Walk over to Harry's console. Excuse me for a minute. Boop.
Yeah.
All right, let's just keep going. But Captain,
roll credits.
No further questions. Captain's prerogative.
And we hit on this a little bit before, but that last shot, you see Kess's shuttle leaving Voyager, and I keep thinking, but wait, they're like 40,000 light years
exactly.
from Ocamp, whatever. Where is she trying to go unless she's got magic powers?
I mean, in which case, why does she need a ship? Because when she left Voyager, she took, of course, a shuttle. But, so that's one more shuttle they were out of, and it was one of the newer, nicer ones too, which sucks. It's opposed to giving somebody a smart car versus giving them like a Lexus. You know what I mean? They gave them the Lexus, and she took off with it, and she didn't. It was like a car rental. She didn't leave her deposit, didn't leave a credit card or anything. So Voyager got ripped off. So if she's like super powered, I kind of likened it into my notes, like Wesley and the Traveler at the end of TNG. They were just off kind of doing their thing. And they didn't need, and of course Wesley's character was revisited in the exceptional Star Trek Prodigy cartoon series. But he didn't need anything to travel around. So why is she flying around? And did she had great powers and lost them? It's like there are big gaping holes in her power set, and it's kind of like, it's that way in comic books too, like with Superman. He gained this new ability, but now he can't do this thing. He used to be able to fly in space. Now he has to wear a breather or something. It's just, it's like whatever fits. It kind of fell into like a little bit too much like, it fits the story to do it this way. And I was kind of annoyed by that, to be perfectly honest with you. It's like, but it's a double-edged sword because they had to have those shortcomings in order to push kind of the meaningful part of the story, which is what Star Trek's all about, is about the characters and emotions. So I get it, but I'm still like, actually the really nerdy part of me doesn't really like it.
Still Stom? I'll make it a little easier for you. It's not the Swarm. They're not that.
All right, Charlie, as we get into our discussion here of Fury, the big, heavy, important topics, the totally relatable things like time traveling to stop your younger self from doing something.
Yeah.
Very relatable.
Martin McFly stuff, absolutely. Yeah.
Yes,
Make sure your parents meet at the Enchantment Under the Sea dance. I get it.
That is the rule. Yeah, exactly. A couple of smaller details, things to point out here. I mentioned before that I really like Tuvok as a character. I really wish that they did more with him, and especially with the relationship that he has with Janeway, because I feel like that was unexplored. They kind of told you that's what it was, but we didn't really get into the depths of it. And I felt like in this, Tuvok is like Voyager's Guinan.
Right.
Think back to yesterday's Enterprise.
Oh, the classic.
Right, because it's Guinan who just goes, wait a minute, something is wrong here.
Right.
And she's the one who has to confide in Picard. Picard doesn't necessarily believe it at first, but he's like, you know what? But I trust her. She's my friend, and if she says this Tasha Yar doesn't belong here, I have to take that seriously.
Yeah,
we got a hint of that here. But I still want more. I always want more with those two.
Yeah, and we've been lucky that we've gotten Tuvok back, even really just as a cameo in Picard, and then in some mentions of Lower Decks. But I would love to. Everybody says, "When's Star Trek Legacy coming along? When's Star Trek Legacy coming along?" I would love to see.
In there.
Yeah, I would love this beautiful anthology series where we get to revisit these characters in real time, the way we did, with Picard. So fingers crossed. Fingers crossed.
Yeah. This really is obviously Kess's story, and Kess's story also has to kind of serve Janeway's story a bit, how she guided her and how she nurtured and mentored her and where that landed us. Were there mistakes made? What happened along the way?
Right.
A lot of those questions go unanswered here, and I think that is part of at least Brian Fuller's concern is, okay, they did this ambitious thing, but did we really dig into the depths that we needed to explain what happened with Kes? There's this line that I sectioned out here. Kes says, "You corrupted me with your ideas. I believed you." We know that Janeway is the hero here. We know that Janeway didn't do anything malicious, right? But I also thought, how, even on just smaller levels, how that is a thing that you can hold against someone if you feel like they didn't have your back, if you feel like they betrayed you or led you in a way that you regret. And it may not be for malicious reasons. It might just be because your goals, your lives, your beliefs grew apart. And I have to hand it to Voyager here, and I have to hand it to the people who wrote this episode for deciding, we're going to go a darker path with this beloved character. And we're going to see what happens when resentment and guilt and maybe just the misunderstanding gnaws away at somebody so that they take it out, probably in the wrong place, but they got to take it out somewhere.
You know, and it's funny because a lot of people, everybody, whether it's a sibling or a child or a parent or a friend, has that moment where a misdirected, somebody doesn't want to take responsibility for their own actions because they're so horrified, or it happens in business too. It happened to me today with a client of mine. And they didn't want to take responsibility for something they did, and then it was my fault. Which sometimes in work you have to be like, yes, okay. But in real life, you don't necessarily want you're not accepting of that. But if it's somebody who you truly care about, you try to walk them through it. It's what we call, I've been a sales trainer for a lot of years, what we call, kind of encouraging a process of self-discovery. Well, I hear what you're saying, but why don't you walk me through what kind of makes you feel that way? What, take me from A to B to C and help them kind of find out that, and again, Kes walked all the way back around to figuring out that, I did. Life comes at you. Life happens. You got to deal with it. And you're ultimately responsible for all of your own actions. It's nobody else's fault. And trust me, I've had loads of people like that in my life that will never get to that point. But I'm a very strong believer in, I got to suck it up. I did this thing. It got me to this point. And what I choose to do with it is, it's something I learned in therapy a lot of years ago. Freedom is what you do with what's been done to you. You got to suck it up. You got to move it forward. You know what I mean? So maybe, if anything at all, that's definitely the conclusion of Kes's journey as she flies off for her now 300-mile sublight journey back to Ocampa, which again just makes no sense. But you just got to let it go. They were at 44 minutes and 58 seconds, and they didn't have 5 more seconds to explain how she got anywhere. She just see her flying away.
Do you think there's an element of this that is also complicated by the fact that now, in the time since we last saw Kes, she has developed this extraordinary amount of power. And think back to TOS, where No Man Has Gone Before. Okay, you have a story there about absolute power corrupting. And I wonder, there is a version of Kes that maybe had some hard knocks, but was also not full of this incredible psychic energy that can actually come back and have a reasonable conversation with Janeway. But this conversation with Janeway can only end one way, and that is with a phaser to the chest to at least take her out of the equation for a little bit and try to find some type of novel solution here to fix this. So that's... I think everything that we see with this character is relatable up to a point. She feels wronged. She needs to take a good hard look at herself. She needs to not blame people for things that are maybe just outside of anybody's control. But then you layer on this extraordinary power, and it's like, okay, well, wait a minute. Now you think you're a god, basically. And you can mete out your own retribution to anybody.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, she's very all over the place. But you got to remember, she's 7 years old.
Yeah,
Which is,
right. Yeah. Don't forget that. Yeah.
Weird thing about her powers that she's so superpowered that she couldn't stop her own aging or slow it down, because she looks like she's 100. I mean, she's supposed to look like she's she's supposed to look like your grandmother in this, basically. But your grandmother who's apparently been on a bender, because she just really looks awful.
Rough.
So maybe her power is too much, and it's like Palpatine from Star Wars, like it made his face all pruny, you know what I mean? Because he's got too much juice, and so there's a lot of that's left unexplained. But if you kind of toss all of that aside, and to your point, make your focus on her emotional journey and kind of her discovery from I'm so full of fury. Pun intended.
Hey, golf clap for mentioning the title.
I know. There you go. Yes, he said the thing. To get beyond that fury, to then turn around and essentially learn a lesson about humanity, which is, we all know that's what Star Trek is really about. Sure. It's reflecting on the realities of our journey as people. That I think that's maybe something that they accomplished. If you take that 15% of it and just kind of squeeze off that other 85% of what are they doing with all of this? Yeah, and her powers, which are just a kind of a mess, to be honest with you.
Well, and let me ask you about this, because this section of the show, we usually don't talk about production stuff, because we usually do that in trivia or kind of in the wrap-up to say, like, okay, as a production, it's like this. But the more I watched this, I kept sort of fighting two sides of my impression of the episode, because I felt like, okay, there's two ways to analyze it. There's two ways to break this down. You have the in-universe story of the character of Kes. Mm-hmm. What happened to her after we lost her in season 4? Where was she? What were the influences on her, and how does that affect her relationship with these people when she sees them again? Okay, that's one thing to look at. That's what we've been talking about now. But then you also have this real-world production side of the story of bringing Jennifer Lean back, bringing the character back after we assumed that we would never see her again. Right. And then what do we do with her here? And I kept wondering, like, was this even the right thing to do, to bring her back and make her this, okay, she's this tough, hardened, corrupted badass who has had these terrible experiences, and it just becomes a fight between her power and Janeway's various strengths, that actually literally, again, have to end with a phaser set to kill, right?
Right.
Is that the best way to bring back this character?
I mean, I definitely don't. And again, in kind of my wrap up thoughts of it, I definitely, this is one of those, you see these terrible legacy movie sequels that come out, and some of them are great, like Top Gun Maverick was great. But then you have like Independence Day 2, which was one of the worst things you've ever seen. Some stuff just doesn't need to be revisited. And maybe Kes had this beautiful moment where she stole the Lexus of the shuttlecraft, and she turned into a being of pure light, which is exactly what happened. Pushed Voyager through Borg space, and it was like, let's leave Kes there and we'll move on. And then we got 7 of 9 as the current character. I did think it was kind of telling, and I did see this in my notes, that Jerry Ryan and Jennifer Lean, they shared a scene but didn't share the screen, because I'm like,
you're right.
You would have to talk about Awkwardsville, USA. And I got to do a scene with the person who, I'm not going to say got me fired, but that I got fired in lieu of. It's funny. I did put that down in my notes, because it was something that was in Memory Alpha, that they were there, but they cut it in such a way that Jerry says state your intention, or Jerry Ryan is 7 says state your intentions, and then they cut it around backwards, and Kes just goes, or whatever it is that she does. And I have no idea if that was by design, but just from an outsider's perspective, it was like, I guess that kind of tracks, because it'd be a little weird. It's like, I got to train my replacement at my job after they canned me. You know what I mean? It would, they would be super rough.
Is the Borg Queen back this week? No, she's not back, but hey, keep that in your back pocket. One more guess.
All right, we have furiously broken down Voyager's episode Fury. We have fully analyzed the return of Kes and what that means for her and for the crew. And in the Mission Log tradition, we have arrived at the end where we ask ourselves a couple of very important questions. Does the episode hold up? And what did we learn? What is the moral meaning message to be gleaned, if there is one? Now, Charlie, you being the guest here, I always like to point out that the episode holding up question, well, that's really up to interpretation, because maybe there's something that you love, but something else that took you out of it. Or maybe they're the way around. Maybe you couldn't stand it, but then there was something that you held on to that redeemed the episode for you. So,
Fair.
Charlie Carden, special guest, tell us about Fury. Does the episode hold up for you?
You know, in a lot of ways, I hate to tilt more, as we've talked about, in kind of the no direction. In a lot of ways, I've even changed my thoughts since I wrote this last night. I said I was
I do that too all the time.
It's like I said, I was glad to see that Kes had an ending, but as I just said in the previous segment, I think in a lot of ways this is Independence Day 2. Nobody needed to make this movie. There was 26 episodes in a season. This was a script that got done, but it was also done by the people who a couple of people who created the show. You know, so it was tough. I thought her departure in the fancy shuttlecraft and turning into the light being and all, you know, kind of mirroring Wesley's journey with the Traveler at the end of TNG. I thought that was great, but for her to come back and she just acts like a disaffected teenager. You know, she's acting like the bratty 13-year-old who, you know, won't pose for the family photo or won't come downstairs for dinner and get off her phone.
Right.
You know, I was like, you know, I would like to have just imagined Kes in kind of outer space land where she's off, you know, hanging out with Q and Trelane and doing spacey, you know, and Wesley and doing spacey stuff. So I just, in the end of it, I kind of felt like the episode was like a really lousy send-off for this kind, gentle, wonderful character. And it's just kind of written off in a lot of ways with Janeway's parting words. Oh, we helped a friend who got lost along the way. Because I love the Ocampa as a race, much like the Vidians, who we absolutely loved. The Ocampa was, well, this is our first, it's like a very short-lived, like, animal that lives like a week or something in like an ant or a bee or something. The bee, there you go. I remember the bee movie with Jerry Seinfeld when my kids were young. So it's like a bee who lives very short, like the Ocampa lived just this very short period of time. And that was super cool, and they could have really explored that had the show gone on, because in 7 years she would have been getting close to death. And we did have that great episode before and after in season 3 where you saw what her life would be like if the doctor tried to put her in the photon torpedo and launch her backwards in time. That was cool. But this just seems like, I feel like we reached a nice conclusion with Kes when she left. And this just felt like kind of like, you know, giving you a paper cut and pouring lemon in it. It just really just does not, it didn't work for me. It absolutely felt, certainly in retrospect, but definitely at the time that I watched it in the spring of 2000, it felt like, oh, okay. Well, I guess that's what we did with Kes. I felt kind of deflated watching it, because I didn't like it, and they suffered from what I call the effect. You saw this in All Good Things, last episode of TNG, when you try to make someone appear as they did a significant period of time previous. Jennifer Lean, who had obviously been through some hard times, she really just didn't look like she did. That kept pulling me out of it. I'm like, well, that doesn't, I can't really believe that's 1995 Kes instead of the year 2000, Y2K Kes, as it were. And so much can be helped and so much can't be helped. But that really didn't work. And the stuff like with everybody, you know, hairstyles change. And so Chakotay, they didn't do any different makeup on him. He looked exactly the same as he did. And, you know, Paris looked the same with the short haircut instead of the long, you know, soccer dude bangs that he had in the first part of the show. And Chakotay had the high and tight, you know what I mean? So, that was just, you know, as someone who's a nitpicker and who really squares away with details, that kind of pulled me out of it as it went by.
I think that I'm mostly on the same page with you. I might have warmed up to this episode a little bit more after watching it a couple of times, but I really want to go back to what I said in the previous segment, because I felt like I could only watch this with half of my brain focused on what does this mean for the production. And so it took me out of the story of just, oh, this is Kes's story. And I do hand it to them, first of all, for just acknowledging, like, this is a character who the audience loves. They still remember. What can we possibly do to bring her back? And I do, you mentioned Wesley and the Traveler, and I was not always satisfied with the way they just said, like, oh, yeah, he's out doing a thing, never to be seen again.
Exactly,
right?
yeah.
Until, little bits here and there. And I felt like with Kes, well, okay, it's almost too similar to Wesley going away. So here's this opportunity. What do we do when you bring her back? Yeah. And if the initial impulse is, let's make her a bad guy, and she's angry, and she's going to destroy Voyager, I just kept asking, is this really the best use of my time or yours?
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I kind of looked at also the mechanics of the episode, and I thought, well, there are certain things you can't think too hard about. Because if today Kes somehow tracked down Voyager and then time traveled back 5 years, well, Voyager is clear on the other side of the Delta Quadrant at that point, so you have to move in space and time at that point, some 30, 40,000 light years, whatever it is.
Right.
And I still wondered, like, well, what was Kes up to for that time? Like, we don't have enough information there. What made things so bad for her? Can I feel a bit of empathy for her? And I don't think they really earned that here.
Yeah, there's nothing to suggest that anything of what she went through. Was it good? Was it bad? Was it indifferent? Does she have a husband and 3 kids at home? I mean, you don't know anything.
Right. It was just like, oh, it's hard. Okay, well, what though?
Right.
So part of your experience with this episode comes down to personal feelings about whether this episode has done Kes right by her return, and I'm not so sure about that. I mean, it's cool to see a returning character. It's good to see Jennifer Lean come back. It is good to revisit an old character and just acknowledge, like, oh yeah, these characters have lives. Looking at you, Carrie.
Yeah, right.
Or
poor
Samantha
Carrie.
Wildman. Come on, It is also good to see Voyager deal with consequence, because that's not something we always get from this show. But again, was this the way to do it? Was it earned? And was it too much to bite off with Kes in trying to cram that into this 45-minute episode? Again, like, A for effort, because you wanted to bring her back. Cool. You decided you were going to do that as a writing staff. But then did you make the right decisions when you decided this was the way to do it?
Right.
I'm not really convinced.
Yeah. No, I'm absolutely with you there. Yeah.
Yeah. So if we can both look at this episode and say, okay, doesn't really hold up as a great episode. However, maybe there are some lessons, some takeaways, some morals, meanings, messages. One of the things that I found, we really do hammer this home, and we get it a lot with Voyager, and that is the theme of the found family. And Janeway, again, not letting any one of her crew simply fall away. She doesn't give up on anybody. Very recently on Mission Log, we talked about Good Shepherd, and that is what Janeway does here. She is going to find this novel way to reach somebody who is lost. So, good. If a guest star, and in this case it is a guest star who is a known former cast member, has to serve really what's going on with the main characters, we do that here, Then I think it really... I kept struggling with this idea of how much a person can change and then how much a person can change back.
Yeah.
I mean, young Kes recorded a message for the person that she became, but that person legitimately went through all of her own experiences to become who she did.
Yeah.
And I don't think you can just say, wait, be me, but be me 3 years ago.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, you needed to have a Counselor Troy in this mix.
Yes.
To really get it solved. Because you're right. I mean, think about yourself. I'm 49, just had a birthday. So what was my life like at 39, 29, 19, which is when I was 19 when Voyager started. My God, all that time ago.
Yeah.
But there's nothing in almost any of that has any similarities to what I feel like I'm like in my life and what kind of relationship I was in, where I lived, what kind of job I had, you know what I mean? And all of those, it's Kirk from Star Trek V. I don't want my pain taken away. I need my pain. It's a corny line, but oh my God, of all the terrible things you may or may not be able to say about that film, that is great writing. Is a great delivery. That is up to your preference of the delivery of it, but it is a great concept. You can't turn back the clock. You know what I mean? I've been through a lot of really lousy stuff in my life, but it's gotten me to the point where I live a happy life, in a relationship with a wonderful woman, live in a beautiful home in a beautiful neighborhood, love my job. I'm lucky, but would I have any of those things if I could just Marty McFly and go back and I really wanted to make it different. So, you're right. I don't buy the core concept, like you were saying, of this episode of, old Cat, she played a video of herself and said, why don't you just be normal and remember who you really are? And the old Cass, who's full of, rage and I was going to say, pee and vinegar, and just so mad that she's just going to be like, oh yeah, I guess you got a really good point. That doesn't. That you're right. That just doesn't make any. You can't stop the charging bull by waving the white flag and it goes, oh okay, well that maybe I'll just calm down then. I don't buy that either. So it's not like, I reached inside and got this last little bit of her that's still good. And I don't think that clicks. I'm really with you there.
Yeah. Because I think I'm sort of, I think there are two conflicting ideas here, which at the most aspirational, positive, optimistic side, you can say, okay, look, you can't control how you became who you are, but you can control who you will be. Sure, we can all say that. We can all say, we're going to be the person we want to be starting now and forever and ever. At the same time, Kes, all of us, we are the conglomerate of all of our experiences and stimuli and relationships, every force that has shaped us. And you can't force yourself to ignore those experiences. You can't force yourself to say, like, oh, no, I'm not that person.
Yeah.
Now, all you can do is really look for who you will be the next day. And I don't know if we got there with Kes in this.
Yeah, it's just I think you said it before. It's not earned, and you find that in a lot of storytelling. You know what I mean? The DC universe movies under Zack Snyder. They wanted to do what Marvel did, but they didn't earn it. They didn't take the time. You didn't grow a character, find out their motivations, and all this different stuff. Where on a TV show you really can. But you got to give it that time, and in TV shows these days have even less time because you get a season of 8 or 10 episodes every 2 years. It's tougher. But and back in the day when there was, it was on 9 months of the year and there was 26 episodes, they really had over 5 to 7 years, and 7 years for our core legacy Star Trek shows. You really had the time to explore those things, and Kes didn't get that done for her because she left, and this just felt more gimmicky. And it actually ironically it aired during sweeps because it was on in May of 2000, so it was like, we got Kes coming back, watch so we can record it on Nielsen, which was of course the way it used to be. So that really bums me out because it felt very gimmicky. It felt like hey, look, this thing is happening, and it didn't treat a character that I wouldn't say Kes was one of my very favorite characters, but I liked the concept of her, and I liked Jennifer Lean's portrayal. And I just felt like this was not reflected here, and that's why it didn't really work for me, unfortunately.
Mission Log is produced by Roddenberry Entertainment. If you'd like to support us directly, you can do so at patreon.com/missionlog for early access to shows and the Mission Log Discord. Our website is missionlogpodcast.com. And for more Star Trek news and discussion, visit trekmovie.com.
On the next Mission Log, Lifeline.
Some of the music for Mission Log provided by Warp 11, online at warp11.com. Special thanks to consulting producers Matt Esposito, Homer Frizzell, Chris Garris, Rand Hurl, Tom Kozak, Julie Miller, Mike Richards, Mike Shabel, Paul Shadwell, and David Takachi. Do you give up? Welcome back Samantha Wildman. She's here to pack Naomi a sack lunch that'll have to get her through the rest of the series. End transmission.
This is a Roddenberry podcast. For more great podcasts, visit podcast.roddenberry.com.